Thank you for watching this video. My name is Francine Michaels, and this is my opinion after having worked for the Postal Service for 17 years about the phenomenon of going postal and what that means. According to Paul White of Entrepreneur.com, major communication problems, inconsistency in following policies, narcissistic leaders, seething disgruntlement, physical and emotional health effects are endemic characteristics of a toxic work environment. They are also endemic characteristics of the place that I worked, the United States Postal Service. From the time I officially became employed by the USPS in April of 1998 until December 1st, 2015, when I walked out of my job because it was a toxic work environment. When I was hired, I signed paperwork to the Postal Service that I would never strike, because the monetary system in the United States is very much tied into the Postal Service. Millions of lives are dependent upon the mail. Their livelihoods are made through the mail. Our government knows this. The leaders at the Postal Service knows this. And absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. This truth is abundantly clear and manifest in the corporate system of the United States Postal Service, in which people are treated like machines rather than individuals because they get a living wage and benefits. This also happened in Lowell, Massachusetts in the 1800s, when women were told, if you don't want to work here, you can leave because there's someone right behind you that's willing to take the job. Many of these women gave their lives for a living wage. It's the same with the Postal Service. Before I was hired, people said, if you have a marriage that you care about, don't take the job. One man that I was working with at Christmas said, we knew his father better than he did. The point I'm making here is that when people sign up for the Postal Service, they sign away their life, their family, and their health. When I walked out on December 1st, 2015, I had tears in my eyes, knowing how unhealthy it was for me and everyone else that was there. A few months prior, I had given a letter to my boss and my boss's boss describing the different problems at the facility. In it, I described in detail the deplorable expectations that were given to me as a supervisor and to other supervisors. After speaking with a man that was in charge of all of the supervisors, I decided to see maybe something can be done, and we can all work together towards this end. It didn't happen. What I didn't understand was that it couldn't happen. A toxic work environment is akin to being in a toxic building. It makes you sick. In other words, the underlying problem was and is not the people that work for the Postal Service, but the culture of the Postal Service. Everyone has heard of people going postal. The Postal Service says statistically it really isn't that bad. I could care less about what they say. I have lived the reality. Anyone that works for the Postal Service knows something's wrong with the Postal Service. Even those that don't work for the Postal Service know that something's wrong with the Postal Service. The first thing that anyone learns in statistics is that they can be manipulated. Because postal employees have been making a living wage, like the women in the mills, no one wants to say anything. Is it really that bad? The lives that are taken by the Postal Service are taken in a slow, intravenous, poisonous drip. That's what happens when a person works in a toxic work environment. What does the Postal Service do that creates a toxic work environment? The Postal Service violates over half a dozen human rights. And these violations result in that which truly can cause someone to go crazy. The Postal Service does not treat people, but like machines, where feelings, needs, and opinions are considered irrelevant as a matter of course. When a person's human rights are violated, they're going to get sick, or they are going to go crazy. What is it about postal culture that makes it different? The intensity of the human rights violations. Where did I get this? Amnesty International articles on human rights. Where I was working, there is no such thing as equality. Some people get paid more for doing less, other people get paid less for working more. There is no equity, and the discrimination is interpersonal and is not based by race or religion. If the person is more difficult to get along with, then they get to work less and get paid more. According to Article 23 Human Rights, everyone without discrimination has the right to equal pay for equal work. If the discrimination is not based on race, creed, sex, or religion, then the discrimination cannot easily be addressed. The unaddressed problem of inequality creates hostility among the employees. The expectation of employees at the Postal Service is continually increased to unobtainable levels, thereby creating an environment in which each day results in managers as well as craft employees leaving work with a feeling of having failed. Article 23 states that everyone has the right to work, to free choice of employment, to just and favorable conditions of work, and to protection against unemployment. When an individual feels bad about their job, it only makes sense that they would transfer that to the employees that are working around them. There are many individuals at the facility that are consistently and sometimes daily intoxicated, while others abuse substances, both prescribed and not prescribed, and no action is taken because the requirements for proving such problems is so complicated. Since nothing is done, the problem continues to escalate, creating a hazardous environment for other employees, particularly if impaired employees are operating large moving equipment like tow motors or pallet jacks. Since everyone has at least general knowledge of these goings-on, interpersonal tension is continuous. What happens when people are tense and agitated? They are likely to be rude and disrespectful of others. Though the Postal Service claims that dignity and respect are important, this is only lip service. In truth, supervisors behave to new employees so badly that the Postal Service actually has statistical data in recent training to supervisors that show the amounts of swearing at employees, condescending comments, and verbal harassment is done across the country. The frustration of supervisors with the above conditions undoubtedly results in inappropriate methods used to get work done. This is a violation of Article 5, that no one shall be subjected to torture or cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment. With new or non-career employees whose employment can be more easily terminated, this behavior of supervisors is more likely to be used. Non-career employees may be alienated from family and friends by the amount of work hours that are required, even though it violates Article 24. Everyone has right to rest and leisure, including reasonable limitation of working hours and periodic holidays with pay. The common phrase of employees at the Postal Service is that when you take the job at the Postal Service owns you. Rights to being with family, practicing a religion of choice, or having reasonable limitations of work are forfeit. A clear violation of Article 12, no one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with his privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon his honor or reputation. The number of hours new employees are expected to work detrimentally affects their family life. Non-career employees can be expected to work up to 12 hours a day, 7 days a week. By law, there's supposed to be 8 hours between shifts, but there have been times that the union has had to impose its authority over management to make sure that that has taken place at this facility also. For many, there is no sick leave, no vacation time, and no benefits for many, many years. This means that the Postal Service not only treats people badly from the beginning, but then it removes the opportunity for the person to use any of the support system they had prior to postal employment. When employees do try to explain it to family and friends, more often they cannot understand the specific stressors that are inherent in postal culture. What do you mean people come in drunk and stoned every day? What do you mean people are making time and a half but aren't doing anything? This strange situation results in bizarre and unusual behavior. Once, a woman who worked for me wrote a statement that I was violating safety procedures by walking on the backs of my shoes. Another boasted of how she made a voodoo doll of me with birdseed and peanut butter. I've been sworn at up and down by employees, yelled at by my bosses in front of employees, seen employees fling large objects across the floor. Once I observed someone deliberately push over a 6-foot metal container of mail onto the floor. Another time I had an employee cursing and yelling at me in a stairway that he wanted death to come upon me and all those I loved. I'm not saying that these were frequent occurrences, but they were most assuredly unforgettable. They demonstrate the bizarre range of thought patterns that people in that environment possess. The culture accepts such a wide range of unacceptable behavior on a regular basis that it conflicts with everyone's inherent sense of logic. When someone is faced with inconsistency and unfairness on a daily basis, it must take a toll on physical and mental health. Early in my postal career, I remember coming into work one day and being told that my workday would start anytime after 2:30 p.m. and end anytime after 7:30 in the morning. They could change this at any time, giving me only 8 hours notice. The unions agreed to these outrageous work standards because they are legal by contract. But just because they are legal does not mean that they are fair and just. There is something inherently wrong when some are expected to work more than others just because they always have, when rumors are the only kinds of information that are circulated quickly, when backstabbing is a consistent coping mechanism, and when there are continual complaints about who did what and who didn't and for how long. The unhealthiness demonstrates the clear violation of Article 1. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. How can there be an environment of brotherhood when people are treated without dignity and respect, or where unfairness in labor practices is the standard operating procedure? I am only one of thousands of examples of unfair labor practices. According to Article 16, the family is the natural and fundamental group unit of society and is entitled to protection by society and state. My family life is destroyed by the Postal Service. Although I did all I could not to neglect my children growing up, it most definitely hampered my ability to function fully as a parent. The medical expenses that I personally incurred as the result of my employment at the Postal Service amounts to thousands upon thousands of dollars for the documentation they insisted that I provide when I needed FMLA, for the medical conditions that the work created over the many years that I worked. This does not include the amount of time off that I needed to take as the result of the working conditions, the toll it took on my marriage, or on my children as they were growing up. Anyone that knew me during that time, in or out of the Postal Service, would tell you that I was nothing more than a walking zombie. At one point, I developed Lyme disease and found out I had sleep apnea, so after having worked a number of years on the night shift, asked to be changed to an earlier shift. I had 2 near-miss car accidents on a day off. My doctor told me if I didn't get off that shift, it could cost me my life. Although there were positions that were available on an earlier shift, the management at that time would not allow me to change shifts. And it wasn't until I hired an attorney that I was able to get the shift changed, after my credit was obliterated, my house nearly foreclosed upon. Stating this is a violation of the contract I signed in order to get back pay for the time they illegally kept me out of work. Except the contract was signed under duress, because it was only through the signing of that contract that I could get my back pay and my job back. The back pay did not compensate for my lost credit, or all of the emotional hardship that my family had to go through because the management at that time decided to ignore the law regarding discrimination against employees. Mine is a solitary example of countless other stories, many of which are far worse than mine. The rules for taking time off at the post office appear to almost be randomly enforced. I was told once to take disciplinary action against one man who took time off to be with his daughter who was severely diabetic. He was a hard-working man, and he had lost his wife to diabetes. Because the daughter was over 18 and was not a dependent, it did not fall under FMLA guidelines. His family life was irrelevant to the Postal Service. This is, however, only one of the ways in which the Postal Service demeans the importance of an individual employee. In the year 2009, over 25 people retired. I believe this man may have been one of those 25. Of that 25, perhaps 5 were recognized by management in any manner. Most did not even get a card. This lack of any formal recognition of any of them showed that management saw them as nothing more than a machine being replaced. Nearly anyone that works for the Postal Service will tell you they do not feel like they are treated like a person, though they cannot tell you exactly why this is happening or how they are doing it. This results in illness, and I believe it results in also what is called going postal. In December of last year, the postal nurse tried to convince me to put in for a rehabilitation position to get a different job because she believed I could not do the job because I had become psychologically deficient. I declined because I told them that I did not need rehabilitation. The truth is, the Postal Service needs rehabilitation. She called me after hearing about this video to make sure that I was okay, given the topic that I'm describing here. In truth, it hurts my heart to know so many thousands of people are working in such conditions, and so many of these thousands are afraid to say anything for fear of what will happen to them if they do. They will be singled out, hours changed, jobs shifted without explanation, leave denied, holidays disapproved. There are plenty of things management can do as a form of harassment that will slip outside the crack of something that can be proven by law. While supervising, I was expected to get people to work that did not want to work, who are constantly complaining, belittling one another, belittling me, while at the same time pleading with those individuals that did believe in doing a fair job to work harder while unable to justify my lack of ability to account for the massive amount of work hours lost by those that were goofing off. They knew how many hours were essentially stolen work hours by management as well as craft employees, while nothing was being done to correct the problem. We did not understand that these were symptoms of a toxic work environment. This is, however, not limited exclusively to the psychological problems that are perpetrated upon employees, but also the physically unsafe working conditions that are completely discounted. Injuries are continually being sustained by those individuals working on letter sorting machines across the country. Anyone that has ever worked on these machines for more than 6 months will tell you how their wrists and shoulders hurt. Thousands have had rehabilitation and surgery, and yet these machines are not only continually still used, but the speed of them is continually increased. The amount of money that the Postal Service pays for contracts with companies and the amount of injuries sustained as the result of the contracts, the amount of work hours lost, etc., is beyond anything that I could calculate without years of research. At the Postal Service, when an accident report is written up, the alleged contributing factors are presented. The Postal Service expects the cause to be something that the employee did. Any supervisor that says otherwise is not being forthright. Those with permanent repetitive motion injuries must continually bring in documentation. The Postal Service does not see this as a waste of man-hours or as harassment. The number of people that end up sustaining injuries from work on these machines and do not report them because of harassment by management only adds to the numbers. Also, what is not documented are the thousands of hours lost as the result of individuals taking time off because they are working in a toxic work environment. The accidents, addictions, medical illnesses created by this toxic work environment cannot easily be calculated statistically. When a person experiences human rights violations, the person is experiencing dehumanization. When a person is working in an environment in which they are dehumanized for 40 or more hours a week, this must create health effects. It must also create effects on society at large. Since the Postal Service has such a large workforce in the United States and our lives affect so many people. My action of walking out in December was not done because I couldn't take it anymore, but because I wouldn't take it anymore. This report is not a complaint, but rather an act of solidarity towards those that worked with me and for me against the truly criminal behavior that the Postal Service exhibits at the highest levels, which I personally witnessed and experienced as a postal employee. Please don't kid yourself. The Postal Service does not need to be privatized. The wealth of information within this organization could make it run as the finest organization in this country if those at the highest levels had their controlling strings clipped. Unfortunately, as an organization, the Postal Service cannot solve its problem because it is too large. It needs outside assistance from an organization that has no vested interest and one that can be objective. There is only one organization that I know of that is large enough to handle a cause such as this. This is an organization which facilitates the improvement of human rights across the world, Amnesty International. Below this video, I will provide a link for you to donate to this organization. I ask that you circulate this link to anyone that you know that might be interested in the cause. Please, do what you can to avoid another incident of anyone going postal. Support the Postal Service by supporting change. Thank you for watching this, and please, pass it along.